live! Oh no!
Oh, you can still, what? Why?
Here, let's try again. All right. Are we good? I think we're on.
I think maybe.
We'll see how this goes. We might be having technical difficulties, but we're going to go ahead anyway.
Yeah.
It's Monday. We're here.
Hi.
Talking about this digital life.
Yep.
I'm Jane Barkley.
I'm Steph Shaw.
And we basically just have conversations about this digital life we're living all the time. And so we wanted to sort of share and start those conversations with you and have you be part of them too. So we'd love to hear what you think in the comments below at any given moment while you're watching this. Today, we kind of wanted to talk about this idea of the hustle. Is this concept just total BS? Is it really great? Hashtag Monday motivation. And explore that a little bit. And for me, the hustle to me, I think you could make it mean a number of different things. But for me, the hustle is really this idea that, as long as you're awake, you're selling. As long as you're awake, you're busy. As long as you're awake, you're working. And it's just this sort of like crazy work ethic that, you're just constantly working, and that you have to do that in order to be successful. And that's what success looks like is, people who hustle hard, right?
Mm-hmm. Never not working.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And I see that manifest in a lot of different ways, I think with different people in my life. But, for me, it's not something that I actually really get. Like, I don't entirely, I get the concept of hustling. I understand that. I'm not an idiot. I get it, and I get the idea that, the harder you work, the more it's going to pay off. And I do think that that's true, that hard work is important.
Yeah.
But now it just seems to have transformed into this thing, or morphed into a work ethic that's like insane to me. And for what? And part of that for me is that, I was just talking to my dad about this, that, my grandpa worked his whole life and then retired, and within about a year he was dead. And so you look at that, and that's not uncommon either, right? And so you just sort of think like all of this time that you've invested in hustling or working, what was it really for? What was it for?
Yeah.
And that's, we were talking about social media last week and really taking it back, making it mean something, making social media great again. And in a similar way, I feel like the hustle's a kind of the same concept for me. Is like, has our work ethic become such that we need to more consciously sort of take life back from it? Like, are we losing out on life for this sort of hustle mentality?
Yeah, and I think part of it is a little bit we are. I was saying to Jane that I'm trying to make a conscious effort right now to, when people ask me, how have I been? What am I doing? To not say busy, because I feel like that's just a go-to
response the standard now. Thing, right? Like, I mean, tell us in the comments below if you find that too. Like, when you're talking to someone, either their response when you say, how have you been? Or their response or your response is busy. Like, I find that all the time, that like, no matter who you're talking to, if you ask them how they've been, the answer is busy. And that's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I love that you said that, like, just trying to make a conscious effort not to say that makes you realize how much you're saying it.
Yeah, I say it a lot. It's bad.
And what are you saying, really? Like, I don't know. There's so many other ways that you can respond to that, so that the go-to now seems to be you're busy is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it's a phase, too. Like, you have to admit that there are going to be phases in your life where you have to work harder than in others, right? Or at least in my mind. But and there are times in your life where you're paying your dues more than maybe in other parts of your life. So I totally acknowledge that. But I have to keep going back to that. Like, what is it all for? Because we were talking about this video. I don't know if you've seen it, but they did a great interview with Gary Vaynerchuk and Arianna Huffington about their very different views on this whole, concept of work-life balance. And in terms of like the hustle, like Gary V would be like on the top of my list as someone who's just always hustling, always working, constantly on, constantly going in the pursuit of this empire that he's he's building or wants to build. And so this interview is really neat because he got asked some really interesting questions about whether or not, you know, the fact that he's constantly going and specifically constantly connected.
Yeah.
He's constantly looking at a device, you know, all of that time spent on digital media. And we've got a great comment here, so I'm just going to interrupt my own train of thought. Gordon saying you're busy is a way of validating your existence. So thank you for that, Gordon.
I mean, I feel like that it's kind of true when people want to seem like they're doing something all the time and show that they're successful, and being successful is being busy. I feel like that's what it's become.
Yeah, and so I think it is tied to success, maybe just being, you know, a productive person, the fact that it does sort of show that you're here, right?
Yeah,
you're
I'm doing something with my
time. Yeah, for sure. I think that's very true. I wonder if there isn't a better way to communicate that.
Oh, I think we're going to have to find one.
But I also, so, you know, going back to the whole interview thing, the issue of digital media came up, and the fact that Gary's constantly looking at a device. And this interviewer basically said, you know, don't you think that you could have achieved more, you know, had you not spent so much time or as much time as you have looking at a device? Like, maybe you could be more effective, maybe you could be more productive and have achieved more. And Gary's point was sort of, well, you know, basically everything that he's built has been through the internet. So his, you know, hustling for him is online. A lot of that happens online. A lot of what he has to do and is building and is working towards happens online. So it makes sense that he would constantly be looking at a device. But the digital world is very much part of that, right? Like we've talked about, you know, just constantly being connected, how much busier that makes you feel, because you're not ever kind of disconnected. You're always plugged into the matrix, right? So do we really have any downtime if we're constantly connected, if we're constantly scrolling? And that, we've talked about this so many times, but like, I'm getting really aggravated by the Facebook scroll in particular. I find that is just really annoying, and I would love to have something that tells me at the end of each day, here's the amount of time that you spent online, and here's the amount of that time that was actually effective or towards something.
You got something out of it.
Yes, because I think the ratio there would be like really, really off.
I'm really scared to see what that ratio would be.
But, I mean, so that means that I have to sort of willfully have some sort of boundary and like just consciously be thinking about that to make it more effective. Because again, it's like, and all for what? Like at the end of the day, you've been working so hard towards what? Because if what it was success and wealth and then the ability to retire in luxury, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's different for different people.
Oh yeah, it would be different for everyone.
But again, you know, working your whole life so hard to then, you know, like my grandfather just die a year later, it makes me really question it, right?
Oh,
and we've talked about this as well. This is maybe, you can, you know, slag me for being sexist here in the comments, but I do wonder if it is a male-centric sort of ideology, the idea of the hustle and like, you know, you should be selling all the time, that feels like a very male kind of concept to me. Maybe that's wrong. When I look around at the women in my life, I don't see a similar thing. I see a different manifestation of it, but I wouldn't call it the hustle. I would say that it's something a little bit different, because part of what makes our lives busy is also is just other stuff. So I don't know. I feel like it's kind of, that is all mixed up in it. And then we're also talking a little bit about this sort of idea of the American dream, which is a lot more prevalent, obviously, in the US than it is here. We're here in Canada, and you know, the American dream is this big thing. Like anybody from anywhere can, if you work hard enough, you can be this great success. And there are so many different people who have proven that true. So you can see them and understand why people would have this American dream of, you know, if I'm talented enough, if I work hard enough,
all the hours,
if I put it in enough, then that could be me someday. To me, the concept of the hustle is very much like this manifestation of the American dream. If I work hard enough, I will get there. And you have plenty of people like Gary Vee who are perpetuating that like, if you work hard enough, you will get there. And I guess there is, to me, what is there, right? Because that isn't here right now.
Yeah, and I think that's because it can be different for so many different people. Like, what I may be working towards may not be what you are.
Yes.
So...
And I think it's different too, obviously. Like, I have kids, you don't.
No.
So for me, the idea of constantly working, which I am, but
all the time.
That's pretty true. It's ironic that I'm crazy. Raising questions about this, but I also, if I'm so devoted to my work that I'm not connecting with my family, like that to me, the point of it, there's no point
to
working that hard because my family's more important. And obviously I'm working to support my family, but if work is completely removing me and hurting my connections to my family, it's not worth it.
No.
At the end of the day. So, and going back to that interview though, like, so Gary Vee had his own sort of take, but then Arianna Huffington has a very different approach to like the hustle and work-life balance, and she's much more like, meditation is good, and at the end of the day, you should take time for yourself, and that we need more soulful things to be able to thrive than just working ourselves to death all day, every day. So two very different approaches to the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think an important kind of conversation to have, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all saying we're busy, we're all connected all the time. Gordon again has a good comment, and this is really important to point out. So Gordon's saying there are fewer jobs today with lifetime security. Absolutely. Yeah. If people are always looking over their shoulder, worrying about the next gig, then there's no time to stop and to develop. We've got to marketability. Absolutely. And actually to that point too, we were talking a little bit about this before we started taping here, because additionally to that, I think that's so true that there's not as much job security.
No.
Across the board, but also sort of thinking about your end of life, which you don't tend to do until I think a little bit later on. You just become more and more aware of like, what are the last sort of years of my life going to be like when I'm not working anymore, and what does that look like financially? What's my life going to be like at that point in time when I am no longer working? But then also, like, we happen to be fortunate, not everybody is, to be in a position of relative privilege, right? We're not living in parts of the world where we have to slave away for absolutely, no money, or in that level of instability. So I feel like that's always worth sort of saying, but for sure, I definitely, Gordon, it's so funny that you point that out too, because I'm now at an age where I'm looking at my parents who both retired early, and probably should not have. And I don't feel like I'm saying that behind their back. I think that they would say that as well. And so looking now really at what security looks like over the next, couple of decades, and sort of the end, the end part of their life, that sounded really bad as it came out of my mouth, but in the latter part of their life. So that's something that I think makes me really conscious of that whole thing as well, now that they're out of that kind of game. But I also have, a lot of friends who are working in different industries where you're just wondering where the next gig is going to come from. You're working contract to contract, and I also teach, and that's something where you don't know from term to term if you're going to be teaching the next term, which is kind of crazy making as well, right? Where you're working without benefits. And so, I just, it kind of comes back to me to that idea of like being in a position of, are we living to work, or are we working to live? And I think that, again, there are different phases of your life where you don't have as much choice in the matter. So how much of that is really controlled by our intention? And just taking that back to the hustle, it's like for me, when I look around at people who are like hustling hard, I feel like I'm very removed from that, and looking at it from the outside, I just think, you know, the mentality of having to work every second of every day doesn't feel like what it should be about.
No. I have a...
Like, is that just me?
No!
Tell us please in the comments. Like,
yeah.
if you really think that this idea of like hustling hard is true and it's motivating and it's what we should be doing, you know, call me out on that. Tell me that in the comments below for sure. But if you think that's kind of BS and that's not the way that life should be, I want to hear from you about that as well. That's what rings true for me.
Yeah. I just don't want to look back. I had a conversation with one of my girlfriends the other day, and she's working crazy. She has her own very successful blog. She has a bunch of her own clients, and she's working all the time. And she's basically never not working. And she's someone she's good at time management. I know she's just working all the time, but I asked her, I was like, when you're not working, you're stressed about working. So what is the point at this point? Like, you need some time. I never want to look back on my life if something happens to me tomorrow and said I didn't live my life as well. Like, I do get we have to work. We have bills. I recently said to Jane, like, I've moved out, so I have so much more responsibility on my own and doing all of that. But at the same time, I don't want to look back on my life and said I spent it all working. And even though I love what I do, I wouldn't change what I do for anything. But that's
a whole other video there, because I have a real issue with that whole love what you do thing, because I think first of all, we don't all have the luxury of loving what we do. Like, if you look at the state of things across the world, it's a very lofty kind of notion. But also, I mean, the idea that we do have to spend our lives working is kind of bizarre in itself. Like, if you really stop and think about it, the fact that we work at all, like, it's weird to me sometimes. Like, that this is what we've evolved into is surreal to me. But we'll put a pin in that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that maybe on another day. But let's stop there. I think that we've explored that thoroughly.
What a good conversation.
But we want to hear from you always as well, what you think, again, about this concept of the hustle and like every minute you got to be hustling and working.
Busy bees.
Selling, busy bees. Whether or not you think that's a good thing, whether or not we can do anything about it, or if you think the whole thing is just a bunch of BS. We want to hear that too. So put that in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. As always, you can find us here Mondays at noon. Come have lunch with us, have a cup of coffee, cup of tea.
I don't have my coffee today.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
That's very abnormal.
Yeah.
That's very strange.
Yeah.
And I also refrained I've been watching, I feel like every week I've been binge watching a different show. My kids just started watching Fuller House. If you haven't.
I'm watching it. There's not a Netflix series I haven't watched.
I had no intention of watching it, but our girls discovered it, and Mira is obsessed. She's completely obsessed with it, and it is so corny.
I know, it's so corny.
It's just like the original.
Yeah, but even more corny.
But I feel like I was really good about like restraining from being like, how these little Fuller House isms. Yeah. Anyway, that's beside the point. Thanks for watching. Come back next week and chat with us about this digital life.
Have a good day, guys.
Bye.